Much love. Return of the sun. The heat. So good to go through cold winter and come out the other side. It's like, it's worth whatever you think is not possible. It is possible, and we adjust, we find ways through, and seasons are good. Seasons are powerful. Whether they're seasons that happen in your perception or in your physical location. I'd be down to live on the equator. I'm not saying I need to always live in extreme places, but for now I'm enjoying the intensity of being separate from the sun for a period of time and having it return so strongly. And snow is very psychedelic, beautifully snow gazing. It's one of the easiest things to get lost in. Like if you're driving, it's actually kind of dangerous. You can get hypnotized by the snow in a blizzard, especially if you're on LSD or mushrooms or something while you're. That's how I learned how to drive. So not recommended, and can be totally impossible at times, totally dangerous and maddening, and could be the worst trip of your life, and it has been for me at times. But I've also had the capacity to do things at a young age that most people wouldn't consider doing, and I've learned a lot about perception and how to navigate those types of extreme conditions. This is a dream, and so how we interact with the dream determines the outcome. And if we don't listen to our death, then the dream will come to an end. So impeccability is the ability to listen, to not be an autopilot. Part of that is not being offended by people that are driving dangerously. Rather than be offended, just, be in your intuition about whether you need to pull over, get off the road, or get past them, rather than be throwing energy at them and looking over at them or trying to show them that you see their dysfunction. It's designed to pull you in, to suck you into that, so you think about that person all day, and you're in this psychic little battle that you had just because of the way you looked at them. Coming out of all that battle, then you can walk the streets of large cities without paying attention to the people, because you're not like judging. You're just moving through the crowd in a magical way where everything sort of disappears and the crowd of people becomes a sea of energy. The freedom of that is incredible. It's unbelievable. You can always go anywhere and do anything and have the most incredible time because of it. It's the same with the forest. To be in the presence of trees and realize that they're conscious, and to be walking amongst them and without getting overwhelmed. It's not like you have to go and hug every tree. A lot of people go into the spiritual process and they start connecting, and they do this extreme thing, which is almost unavoidable. I'm not saying, I did it in my own way, and everyone based on their own patterns will do these things. So, but it is exciting to feel everything with the entirety of your being. So when you get activated and start to have that electrical healing happen, and you're able to connect to the mother through your energy system, and you start to form that relationship, it is such a beautiful, life-changing gift that it's hard not to become overly spiritual. But eventually the goal is to get pretty grounded and sober and understand that there's so much more, so that you don't end up staying put in this sort of spiritual, Toltecs aren't spiritual, they're energetic and practical. And spirituality is like a diluted version of religion, so it's just another form of a program. but the Toltecs refer to that which we are an extension of as spirit. We also refer to it as intent. To me, it's a designer and a psychedelic awareness that we all have, that we are being taught through. So if life has not become pretty psychedelic, then there's a lot of things to change so that it can be, but not in a reckless way by taking psychedelics. Although there's a time and a place for that, there's a way to get to these psychedelic states without having to take any medicines. And so that's what I teach. That's what I help people to do. It's a longer way to get there, but it's much more realistic, pragmatic, intense, because you go slow, and slower is actually faster. Everything's flipped in this place. If we can slow things down, then we can be realistic about where we're at. Stop spinning our wheels. And then you start to make real progress instead of trying to convince yourself that the highs represent the totality of you. Your highs, your moments of clarity, unless they're permanent, they can't represent where you're at. They're just experiences. But clarity is a beautiful thing to work with. And we do want to spend as much time getting to it as we can, but not trusting in it or assuming that it's always going to be available until it is. And then clarity becomes a trap. When you move into the dreaming world and you start learning how to use gazing and other things to see and interact with this realm in a magical way, you've moved into power. And power is even a bigger trap. It's very dangerous to not get seduced by power, to not get overwhelmed or to move into illusions of grandeur around your newfound relationship with it. Dreaming, this is a dream. And so the art of dreaming is the art of living in harmony. Learning to listen to the bird song, to the sounds of creation. And allow your being to receive those messages. Not needing to understand or interpret or try to know what's being said. We are told these bird songs are mating calls. I don't know if you can hear the birds, but it's just incredible. They're just responding. And yeah, this place is all communication. The earth is fully sentient and willing to share her teachings with each of us. They're not linear though, they're not words. They're feelings. Profoundly beautiful healing feelings. Learning to drink sunlight will transform your life once that happens. Once you really drink it, once you really learn to draw it into your being. Sun gazing, I don't stare at the sun directly necessarily. I use whatever is in front of me, between me and the sun, wherever it's lit up. I place my awareness inside of it. And I just go into silence and I get healed. I don't need the sun. The silence is enough to heal you. But the sun makes it so much easier to get silent. And this is a place of power, so the weather was always an omen to Juan Matus when he was working with Carlos. Depending on different things that were happening would determine what they would do with their day. And the crows and different beings would come and visit and say, give messages throughout the day or throughout the apprenticeship as well. So Don Juan wasn't in his mind. He was following a very powerful thread in order to help Carlos and all of the other apprentices. But those kind of apprentices don't exist necessarily at this time, because we're all being offered a chance to discover our own way. That's why those books were written, actually, because their lineage came to an end. And Carlos recapitulated his life and shared his essence with us through those pages. They're alive in that way. Just because he was able to do something that cool doesn't mean he was perfect and or, not human. Although he died and was brought back to life by sorcerers, and so very strange. Can't imagine what kind of person, what that's like to have died and had other people's life force lent to you, essentially. Or I don't even know if that's the correct way of talking about it. So thankfully he told us how dangerous advanced sorcery is by telling us what happened to him. And Carlos did things that no other Toltec had ever done. And then Florinda and Taisha went on to do things that no Toltec had ever done. So we're in a very, very powerful time. If those people were the furthest away from that power and the most recently initiated are doing things that the ancient ones could not, that means everything's going to change. The resources we didn't know we have will become available to us. Magical resources. As the transhuman world starts to present itself, the soulless side of things starts to, the nothing from the never-ending story that starts to spread over the realm. The soullessness. Then more need for us to return to our soul, to become soulful and not boxed in. It's hard to get out of the box. I'm still comparing myself to my peers, and that's been keeping me from realizing my uniqueness. And I'm getting out of that box. And it's not easy. It's taken a while to realize how different I am in what I've discovered in the gazing side of things. But when you read the Castaneda books, it's just like scratching the surface of something terrifyingly deep and powerful and infinite. So I've done nothing. And so if we can all show up as beginners in that way, recognize how incredible an opportunity it is to become perceptually liberated without losing your marbles, then we'll be practical about the way in which we do it, rather than reckless, like I was. I was desperate and reckless and did things that damaged me. But that was part of my story. I'm not regretting it or at odds with it. But I recognize how lucky and how much personal power I have to have got out of how far I took it. Most people that did the kind of thing I did or do the kind of thing I did don't find their way back. Like, I had to go into construction intensely and figure out how to be a normal person after having been undone. And that's what balanced my being. That's why I talk a lot about going back into the world that you're running from. If that's what you're doing, don't run from it. And if you do, be able to walk back toward it someday. And because it's not scary. It has the illusion of causing so much stress that it can destroy you. But when you learn to become free of stress to the degree that you need to be to go back in, then it doesn't take your center any further, any longer. This realm is incredible, and this is just one layer of the onion that we exist in and communicate in. Eventually, enough of us can get together and start to go into other layers together. And I know everyone's using a lot of ayahuasca and mushrooms and stuff to do their type of travel, but there's these movements, the shamanic movements, that are, once they're embodied and usually balanced with some martial arts, then there's a groundedness that occurs that allows you to feel safe to travel perceptually, and you don't need medicines. Movements really are the difference. Most people don't understand how simply powerful they are, and that's why I'm continually talk about them. Is you don't even need to recapitulate, essentially, because the movements will do the work in itself. It will lead you to the recapitulation whether you like it or not, because your youthful memories will just start coming back just by being creative with how you move inside. Like, it's not just copying the movements, it's learning to embody them, to feel them. Some people, it takes years of doing them before they suddenly realize what's happening, and some people, it happens the first time they do it. They cry. And yeah, so it's not about what you eat or what you drink or don't drink or who you hang out with. It's about really laughing at all of it somehow and doing what is going to really work. In the books, Carlos is always trying to get Don Juan to help people who are dying, friends of his or whatever. And Don Juan had to explain it to him that I can help them, but the only way I can help them is by giving them tasks to do that they are not going to be able to do, otherwise they wouldn't be dying. And that sounds harsh, but he was just trying to explain the program that runs. People want to be saved. That's why they go to the doctors. And I'm not saying there isn't a time and a place to go get help. And even MDs can be life-saving miracle workers. It all has to do with their personal power, not so much about what we think it's about. Because it's all energetic and emotional based. Because we are not physical creatures. And so if you're with the right MD or the right shaman or the right healer, they can hold such a powerful space in the process of you surrendering to the process that you can heal inside of that container, and it's okay to get help. But hopefully we can find a way to not end up in the need of that situation. But Florinda Donner Grau was unwilling to consider that the medical system can be helpful, because she was raised in an alternative way, and so the Toltecs were like kind of fucking with her around that. Like, it's not that naturopaths have it figured out and MDs don't. Everyone's under an illusion, and it has to do with the person within the system. You could go to a shaman that could make things much worse. You can go to an MD that can make things much worse, which is more common than not for all of them. Naturopaths, the more we start to look into it and all the deceptions that are associated, Chinese medicine is really ancient and powerful, but how many of those people went along with the bullshit, right? So they don't believe in what they think they believe at the root, because they've gotten so spun out by the fear and the psyops and the propaganda. So it's all just such a trip, right? And it's going to be really difficult for a lot of people to take that next step and to realize that these things that are so dangerous, supposedly nukes, viruses, terrorists, all this stuff we're being told, it's fabricated false flag psyop designed to hijack our already hypnotized selves and keep us in a realm of fear that will make us useful puppets, kept alive so that we can be fed off. Everyone's like, well, why don't they just take us out if they have the ability to run psyops? This is a power thing. It's not about greed. They're not trying to win the Monopoly game. They already did. This is sorcery. This is for the predator. This is for the beings that feed. This isn't a human game. We're dealing with a non-human force that has intervened upon us. Toltecs have discovered that. But surprisingly enough, a lot of the people that practice this stuff in the modern day refuse to look at what's really happening and are in a deep state of cognitive dissonance, practicing reading Castaneda but not putting it all together, and remaining in an isolated version of the theater. There's a much more interesting story to witness. This is the greatest story ever told. We're inside of an infinite story. Don Juan said, I vanquish my mind, I become a collection of stories. He could see through and look at and know people's histories, their memories, because he had emptied his. He's no longer separate from Source, and Source can see through and witness all that there is as well. There's no hiding anything. You're never alone. We are being witnessed. We are in the presence of other interdimensional beings that can see us and we can't see them. But that doesn't have to be scary. They can't do anything to you unless you get scared enough. And a lot of them are helping. Some of them are tricksters, spirits, and stuff, but it's all part of the learning. But learning to be in silence in nature, or in the largest city in the world, you get to listen to all the conversations. I was at a show once where the sound quit working, and so there was no set break music in between sets, and they had to shut down for a period of time. And I don't sit there and socialize like most people. I usually go alone because I prefer to stay silent and I don't engage. But I got to listen to hundreds of conversations all at one time, and I could isolate each. I was able to hear so many different streams of thought. And you can just hear the program throughout the conversations. You can witness these things in such a unique way when silence is available. And so it is not easy to reach that kind of level of silence. I'm not claiming it is, but I just want to make sure people know that it is possible. I was terrified I would never learn to meditate when I was 13, or 15 or something. I had this fear of not being able to do it. And then once I learned and had a breakthrough, then read Castaneda and stuff, it gave me permission to move beyond meditation. That's what my elder would say, is rather than meditate, focus. You can focus on feelings instead of thoughts, and that will unlock the door. Resolve, focus, determined, unbending intent. Much love.